All right, welcome back everybody. We are now going to start our work on Unit 5. Unit 5 is, I think, where things start to get interesting in terms of what we're doing with our web design work. So far we've been learning what I call rudiments of this technology. We've learned the basics of HTML, we've learned the basics of CSS, including most of what you really need to make fairly decent looking web pages. But I still consider it rudiments, because there's some higher level things you have to start thinking about as you start to build web pages. I know a lot of people don't consider themselves to be artists, and you notice that this chapter is called Web Design and Layout. This is where things start to get a little bit more artistic and pretty. And you don't have to be an artist to make a web page look good. Let's just talk about that first. There's a lot of logic and planning that goes into this type of thing. And there's this kind of like this golden rule. You guys ever hear of the KISS rule, right? Not the. Yeah, keep it simple, stupid. Or stupid, simple. No. Just keep it simple is really kind of the rule of thumb. Look at what Google does with their stuff. They don't make it excessively graphically oriented or anything. They keep it really clean, predictable where stuff is. It's easy to read. Usually white backgrounds with black text on top of it. And that's really a good design principle. Just keep it simple. Usually looks better. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. In Chapter 5, there's actually not a lot of work in Chapter 5. In fact, there's actually no work. It's more of a conceptual chapter, frankly. And the objectives for Chapter 5 are this. So let's just take a look at these really quick. So what types of organization do you use for a website? What are there, principles of visual design? There absolutely are. There's these basic principles you can apply to most designs to make your site look pretty good. And they're learnable tasks. So if you don't consider yourself an artist, that's okay. You don't have to be an artist. You just have to have a somewhat reasonable eye when you look at something and be able to identify that it's ugly or not. The other thing that we often don't think about when we start to write code is, who is this intended for? That's really a big issue. You got to know your audience. You're going to have a different audience if you're writing a fan page for a video game, first-person shooter game, versus somebody that's shopping for shoes, for example. Also, how do you set up your navigation? Your navigation should be something that people can figure out. If they have to get a PhD to figure out how to find something on your site, there's a problem, in my mind. It should be easy to get to anywhere on your site from any spot on your site. So that's very important. How do we make our sites more readable? The text on the web pages, believe it or not, is really important in a lot of ways. For the most part, it's the text, the words on your page, that drives Google searches. Google searches can look up images, but a lot of people don't put alt tags on their images, so that makes them unsearchable. That's one reason why you want to put your alt tags on your images, but the words you put on your page are important. What graphics you use. Now, we talked already a little bit about sizing of graphics, what's a good format, but there's also images that are what I would call appropriate and inappropriate. My general rule of thumb on that one is always use your own stuff, if you can. Because then you have to worry about copyright issues or anything like that. And then there's some of these universal design concepts that are important. We also have to start thinking a lot about compliance with ADA. So that's the American with Disabilities Act. And then there's some layout design techniques that are kind of universal that you can apply to most website structures that work really well, and the reason people use them is because they work really well. So you can just follow in the footsteps of others and often come up with really good-looking stuff without a lot of effort. And there's also some best practices that the author shares that I think are really good tips, and a lot of them I share the same types of philosophy as whoever wrote this book. I feel like we're pretty like-minded. It's no surprise they're from Wisconsin too, right? I think that's always cool. All the examples are from Door County. So we know they're a local yokel, which I think is cool as well. All right, let's look at the material. All right, it says overall design is related to the site purpose, and what they're showing you here is an example of two web pages. So once again, there's an example of a Door County website, right? And this one's about kayaking. You got this beautiful full screen picture of these kayaks sitting on a lake with the beautiful sky and the colorful canoes, and there's like a layout and your eye is drawn to it. You see the word kayak, I mean, that's about all you need to see, right? And so what kind of people are you drawing in here? You're looking for people that are looking for something to do in their spare time that's adventurous and cool and invigorating and gives their life meaning, right? So real heavy on the graphics, barely any words on the page, the color is strong, and it speaks to kind of like this innate feeling we have inside of ourselves to want to go explore or whatever it is. Heavy on the graphics. Take a look at the other site. The other one is Web Design and Instructional Technology Resources. Just text with a bunch of links organized into categories. Kind of looks like maybe one of my Blackboard pages, because what's it doing? It's just delivering information, folks. And for a person looking for information, it's the words on the page that they're looking for. They're not looking for, I don't need to see a picture of a, something on there, because that's not what I'm here for, right? So different audience. Also notice the color scheme. Business websites often white backgrounds, dark text. If they're going to throw color in there, it's going to be a really safe one like blue, because blue is considered kind of like a business color for whatever reason. So you always consider your audience. There's also ways to kind of organize websites that make sense. Okay, so for example, there's different approaches. Typically when we go to a website, most websites are arranged in the first approach, which is there's a hierarchy, right? You have a home page, and then you might have several other main pages, and some of those pages sometimes will have sub-menus for like sub-content. So for example, if I had a page that was like maybe home, about, contact, I might have a gallery. Then when I go to the gallery, it might have like several different galleries depending on what we're looking at. So there's a hierarchy. There's a kind of like a top-down approach. There are also websites though where you go to and the organization is, I'm looking at one thing, and now I'm looking at this next thing, and then I'm looking at this next thing, kind of like a PowerPoint, where it's linear. You're logically going from one page to the other in an order, because it's kind of like a PowerPoint, basically. There's also the random approach, which is, notice they call that web organization, which is like there's no necessary hierarchy, because really what's happening on the back end is there's some back end software driving the whole thing. So I think of like a site like Facebook where it seems like it has a hierarchy, but the truth is it's really a collection of all these different applications working together, and it's all relative to who you are and what you're doing on the site. Okay, and that becomes a lot more complicated. That's really more like true application building. What we're working on right now is basic website structure. That's what we're learning in this class. So take a look at the hierarchy. Here's what I was talking about. So if you're doing a hierarchy, you have a clearly defined home page. Navigation to all the major things are easily found either on the left sidebar or the top. The standard these days seems to be at the top. Some of them will have other categories below them, but it usually doesn't go too deep. One of the assignments you have for this unit is to start thinking about the site you're going to build for this class as a final project and what hierarchy or structure you're going to use. And I'm going to point you real strongly to follow a setup just like this. So one of your assignments will be like, what will your site, what pages will be included on your site, and what does that structure look like? It might be very similar to what you see on the screen here. So when you go to do that assignment, you kind of have a little bit of a roadmap, hint, hint, right? All right, so it's right there on the screen. If you were doing a hierarchy that's got maybe a lot of different separate top-level pages and very little depth to it, your hierarchy might look like that. So maybe you have, 20 logical categories that you would go into. Sometimes you have a hierarchy that's got very few categories but can go really, really deep. So I think of like e-commerce sites are often like this, where I might have different categories of products to buy, and then as I drill down, some categories have lots of products and some don't, right? So that's an example of that. The linear organization, like I said, like a PowerPoint. But there are websites that are set up like this, right? You go to one page, you've consumed the content, click next, go to the next page, very much like a PowerPoint. The random organization, that's one that doesn't really make sense. It's not something you guys are going to build in this class. I'm just telling you that right now. It really takes a higher level of coding. And notice this is not typically used for commercial sites, but actually that's not, I wouldn't call that necessarily true. I think it is. It just depends on the complexity of the site, frankly. All right. Now we're going to start to talk about some design principles, but I want to show you something that is a perfect example of horrible web design. You guys ready for this? This is awesome, right? Well, we could probably look at your week 1 or 2 homework and we can say that's a good example of horrible web design, right? Because we're not really designing anything at this point. We're just playing with tags, right, and styles. But you know what? There's certain principles that we have for design that I think are fascinating. And I'm going to point you to, there we go. Now, before I click this link, here's my preface to this. This site has won awards year after year for being the worst site on the internet.
What is the site?
Design, it's right up on the screen there. It's called Ling's Cars. Right. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna click. Here we go, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Welcome to lingscars.com, folks. This is
That's
a,
just messed up.
yeah, it is very messed up. That's pretty astute. Look at the background. Super. This is a business website. This guy sells automobiles in England.
And also for inappropriate gifts.
All right. So really busy background. He's got animated GIFs that are moving all over the place, considered a no-no. He's using colors that really are harsh to the eyes and really aren't good color combinations. But he's leveraging this. He knows his site is horrible and plays on it because people come here just to look at how horrible it is. Here we are looking at it, right? And I'll tell you what, if you scroll down here on this site, it only keeps getting better.
Yeah. What's this site called?
I mean, like, look at this guy's face here bouncing around. It's lingscars.com.
Lings?
L-I-N-G-S cars.com. All right, so, I mean, you can kind of scroll through and take a look at, like, I mean, this is a legit business in England, right? But you guys can see how, like, this kind of hurts your eyes. This is really a classic example of a lot of bad website techniques all rolled into one place. Yeah, it is like really. I mean, wouldn't you buy a car from that guy?
Yeah.
Come on now. I mean, he's awesome. But here you go. This is an example of some bad design. Most car companies would not do this to you, right? In fact, what you want typically for a business website is something that's really clean and easy to navigate. I wouldn't call this an example of it. And I know somewhere in here he's got like little kudos for like all the bad awards that he's won. At one time at the top, they used to have like a live karaoke thing. Like they actually had somebody sitting in the office like singing karaoke all the time.
On purpose now.
Yeah, it's completely on purpose, Cordy. That's exactly the point.
Was it like to start off? Was it not on purpose?
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But you know, here's some great examples of what not to do. But at the same time, sometimes what not to do turns out to be the thing to do. It just depends on your audience. He's now developed an audience that basically comes here just to see how bad the website is. All right, so that's a wonderful example of a bad website. You know, and I'll tell you what, another really cool tool I'm going to point out to you guys is this one. I'm going to take you to this website called Archiveorg. And some of you might know about this. This is an organization that started, I want to say about 20 years ago, something like that. And their goal, it's a nonprofit, is to archive the internet. You guys hearing this?
Yep.
Right? So any publicly searchable page, they daily scrape the internet and download it and store it. Now this is really kind of an interesting thing. To access the archive, you actually use what they call the Wayback Machine here at the top. But I do also want to point out the fact that they have a bunch of other resources that are cool. So some of those resources here is this is a site where people can freely share royalty-free content. Images, videos, music, movies, television shows, etc., etc. A lot of people store their stuff here for free. So if you're ever looking for free content to put on a website that you don't have to worry about it, this is a place. All right? But the Wayback Machine is pretty astounding. So what you do here is you put in like a URL. So like, let's say I want to see what the Apple website looked like in the past. Okay, so I'm going to just type apple.com, and this goes into its search engine. And what you're seeing here in the form of a timeline is a timeline over the years. So looks like Apple had their first website back in 1996. Think about this, 1996. It was not that long ago, folks, 25 years ago. I know some of you aren't quite that old, but I was an adult at this time. Well into my adulthood, actually. And then all these little like spikes that you see on the timeline are snapshots of the website. And you notice as we've gone into the future, the snapshots are constant. So like in 2019, every date that's got a highlight on it means that the website was updated. And all I have to do is find a date, click on it. In fact, a time on a date, and I can see the version of the website at that point in time. So it might not be too pertinent for 2019, but sometimes I find people that, like for example, have created a site, and then they lost their hosting, or it got deleted, they lost their files, they changed the website, they want to go back to the content that they had in the past. Here's a way you can retrieve old content from any website that was publicly searchable. So for example, I'm going to go to like, I don't know, 1998 for Apple's website. Looks like they only did 2 edits that year. You know, shows how busy they were on the web. Although in December they did a whole bunch of them. So let's just click on one of the timestamps in December. And what it's going to do is pull up from the archive the version of the site at that time on that date. And this is what their website looked like. Now sometimes when you come here and you pull up content, sometimes the images don't load because the images were actually stored on other servers. But notice, you know, what their website looked like. It's not all that, folks, right? This is Apple. We're not talking like, you know, Joe's website. You know, sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to. Okay, Jimmy's website. We don't have any Jimmy's in the class. You know, who's like some amateur putting a site together. But big professional websites and the look that they went for. And not only that, I can also do the right-click, view source, and even look at the code that they created back then and how it was structured. I think that's amazing. And so that's really kind of a neat tool, but it also shows you how far we've come design-wise and technology-wise. I think it's really a cool tool. You know, I even have like some of the original websites I first did as a web developer out here. Every once in a while, I get brave enough to show them to my classes to show you how far I've come as a designer. I'm not going to do that today, though, because we're running out of time. But you can probably go out there and find them, so I'm just saying. All right. Now that we got that kind of out of the way, so there are certain techniques that we can use visually to actually drive viewership on a website to match what our audience is expecting, both content-wise and style-wise. So here's some of the things that we use in design to kind of appeal to users. So notice first of all the example that they have here on screen, and I often, when they have these little graphics, I have to come in here and make them a little bigger. So they show this sample website. Now once again, they're catering to somebody that's vacationing, right? Somebody is, I mean, who else would go to a bed and breakfast, right? If you're on a business trip, you're going to end up at you know, the Holiday Inn or something in, you know, downtown wherever, or wherever cheapest motel is you can find. But if you're like traveling, you know, with your wife or something, and you want to find a really romantic place, well, I might go to the Casino Sedona bed and breakfast. Look at those beautiful views, you know. So the images become really important because we're kind of selling that. However, there still is a lot of information here. And there's also kind of a logical layout. I can find the menu pretty easily at the top. They obviously are trying to get me to book a room, so their reservation system's right on the screen. So they're considering the audience here that this is people that are looking to do this particular thing. And so notice some of the things that they're doing. They do have letters over the graphics, but notice that they're careful about where they place them. So the letters have shadows and borders around them, so I can see them against the white background if it is one, but it's white letters on top of a dark background, so there's a contrast. There's also kind of like a repetition thing going on. So what they mean by that is they kind of have this pattern of providing headers and then information. So the proximity, how is the information grouped on the page? Well, things that are related to each other. Like if I have a reservation system, it kind of makes sense to put it all in one area. I don't want to put like, you know, the room information or the date information here and have the search button over here. They should be grouped together, right? Also the alignment. Notice that they have kind of like this layout, which is really common, which is a header at the top, a footer at the bottom, a center content area, and then a left and a right sidebar. That's a really common layout. Not only for websites, also for application building, that's the most common layout. Why do they use it? Know why? Because it works. People know where to look for things and they expect that kind of a layout. They really do. I mean, even look at your PowerPoint screen here. It's got all those elements in there. I got like a content area, I got a sidebar, I got my navigations at the top, I got a little footer with information at the bottom. That's kind of what we expect to see. Why do we expect to see it? Because somebody figured out a long time ago that's really a good way to do things. Other thing we have to think about here is in the modern web, we have a lot of people that surf the web. And Cordy, I don't mean to pick on you, but you have issues with your vision, right?
Yep.
So if you ever walk over and see what Cordy's doing on his screen, he's got to zoom way in to see the content. We got to think about that as designers. I don't want to design, like if he's hard of seeing, I don't want to punish him. I don't want him to like not go to my website and buy my product. I got to make it so that he has a way to actually see it. If you actually do work on like any government website, so if you guys get hired by a branch of government to do web development, they're really huge on like making the fonts high contrast, being able to increase the size of the fonts, to limit the amount of graphics on the page, to limit which colors you put on the screen. Not only for your regular web screens, but for your phones too. These are major issues. And you guys are all young right now and your eyes are working great, but I'm going to tell you, coders, you watch people who do a lot of work on screen over their lifetime, and when they get usually to my age group, they're almost always wearing glasses or contacts. I'm proud to say that I don't, because I practice a lot of techniques to break my 18-inch focus on the screen. I look away from the screen every once in a while. You know, I look outside the window and look at the sky. You know, silly stuff like that. It makes a difference. But there are issues here. So people do have physical disabilities that use computers. Did you guys ever notice on Blackboard? I'm going to show you something that's kind of interesting here in Blackboard, if I can actually find my browser window. Like how some of these things now have these little speakers next to them where you can download the document and it'll actually read it to you. Who is that designed for? Who would need a web page read to them? Somebody they can't see? Blind people surf the web, folks.
Screen readers.
Yeah. Deaf people surf the web too. So if you're putting like audio on a site, you know, why does YouTube have closed captioning on everything? Because they don't want to lose out on the people that are hard of hearing. And there's lots of them. It's not a small audience. So these are really important considerations in modern web design. How much it's important is relative to the type of site it is. If it's a site that everybody should have access to, like a government site, they make sure everybody has a way to see that site. Other thing that you always have to consider, right? Slow internet connections. Now, we're in the day of broadband. Nobody does dial-up anymore. Kinda.
Slow internet spectrum.
Yeah, you know, like if people who are on cell phones don't always get good cell phone speeds. Even if you have 5G or 4G or whatever you got, sometimes you're in a part of the country or state or whatever that doesn't have good cell service. I'm on US Cellular here in downtown Racine. It smokes. right? I also got that because when I go up north, it actually works. But I've had other cell services where I go up north and it's like nothing. Or I travel out west with US Cellular when I don't have my national plan turned on, and I leave Wisconsin and all of a sudden it's like 3G or 1X. So it's like basically all I'm doing is making phone calls. I can't even surf. And you got to consider those people. So the way that you design your stuff is pretty important. All right. There are some helpful guides here. So if you want to examine these documents here, you know, if you're designing for people with accessibility issues, you will be keenly aware of this, and you'll have certain parameters you have to follow, and those are actually specified by the W3 organization, just so you know. All right. What about when you're actually creating words for your web pages? Notice these are really kind of helpful tips, I think. Unless you're like putting out a book on screen or writing a multi-page article, you should typically avoid long blocks of text. So in other words, a block of text that maybe you have to scroll 3 or 4 times before you get to the end of the paragraph. If you have a lot of text, try to break it up into smaller pieces. Put spaces in between things. More paragraphs are better. Really good example of that is look at any newspaper. At most, they're going to have 3, 4, 5 sentences a paragraph. And they do that because they know your eye, when it's reading, can keep track of where it's at better if you break it up into pieces. Bullet points are always really good too. So if you have just like a list of things to provide, bullet it, or just one single line. All right? Headings and subheadings help a lot as well to organize your information, so do that. But short paragraphs, way to go. All right. They also have some tips as to like what are good practices for fonts to use. So they have a list of fonts here, and I agree with this list very wholeheartedly. These are the basic fonts that you see on most websites, and the reason they choose them is because they work, and people are used to reading them, and their eyes are comfortable reading them. Like the font that's up on the screen right now, this is an Arial font. It's a sans serif font that's clean and easy to use. And then the other thing that they point out is to use an appropriate text size. So in other words, I told you early on that you should always set a base size for your font for the whole site. The default is 16 pixels. And for some cases, that's fine, just leave it alone. Other times, you might actually think, well, you know what? I expect most of my people to be looking at this on a cell phone. I might actually choose to go up to 18 or 20 as my base size. Because I want people to be able to read the words. Otherwise, how are they buying my product or service, right? Have you ever gone to a website where the font is so small, you're like, what the heck are they thinking? They obviously don't want me to buy their stuff, you know? These are really common sense things. But the other thing that they're pointing out is with the 1M and the 100% is if you set a base font size for your whole site, then you can scale out your fonts pretty easily. So if somebody goes in there and decides to change the font sizes themselves, which you can do in a browser, I don't know if you guys know that, most people don't, but I was one of those geeks in the past that used to. That allows it when you're changing screen sizes and zooming in and switching to mobile for things to scale correctly. Notice also they say strong contrast between the text and the background. You saw an example of that when I was changing the opacity on that background, how the text got hard to read as it became more opaque because there was no contrast. The worse your vision is, the more of a pain that is. And then the other thing that happens is people look at, once again, on mobile devices or laptop screens, and they're going on battery power. They don't have good power management settings, so their screens are dim, and that contrast becomes really important. Why does the author put black text on top of a white background for the PowerPoint? I'll tell you what, that's the best one to use for a PowerPoint because I know it's going to look good on that screen. Simple as that. All right. Yeah, so here's a little tip. Carefully choose the text that you use in hyperlinks. So when you make some text a link, old school thing would be like, we'd use all caps and say, click here, right? Like, what, I'm too dumb to figure it out myself? You know what I mean? Sometimes you do have to point things out for people, but what I always do, like I look at like what I do on my Blackboard shells, right? Like normally the links look like this, and I think they're a little hard to read. So what I usually do is I make all my links bold. That's maybe a little obnoxious, but I can tell it's a link, right? Even when I have my assignment links, I color them kind of the color of a link so that you know it's something you can click on. A lot of instructors don't do that, and that's okay. I'm not judging, but I'm a web designer, so I think about those things. So it's just kind of a conscious design choice. All right. There are ways to work with color that are better than others, and I showed you some of those color picking tools a couple weeks ago. And if you want, there's actually very learnable approaches to learning how colors work together. All the colors are based off of the color wheel like this. So there's, basic colors, and color theory does not always match up with screen color or print color. You know, when I was a younger student, I don't know where I first learned this. Maybe it was high school or maybe it was junior high school. And we were taught Roy G. Biv. You guys ever hear that? You know, and if you take those letters and spell them out, it's like red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and violet, or something like that. Or blue, indigo, and violet. Yeah, that's what it is. And those colors are represented on the wheel. And then as you kind of move from color to color, the colors actually form a circle. They kind of have this continuous pattern. It's all judged by mathematics, folks, too. It's not an accidental thing. It's based on electromagnetic light emanations and the mathematical patterns that are formed by them. It's not like, I think yellow looks good with blue, right? Those are contrasting colors, but typically what happens is things that are on opposite ends of the color wheel are contrasting with each other. So would yellow work on top of purple? Sure, I'd be able to see that. Would bright green work on top of this? It wouldn't be pretty, but it would work, you know. And these are considered very strong colors. So sometimes what you have to do is not use really strong colors and kind of back it down a little bit in order to get the look that you want. There are lots of tools out there, and I know that we talked about this already, but they show that like sometimes you can work in what we call monochromatic color schemes, or it's basically the same color but just lighter and darker. Or we can do analogous, so it's what's next to it on the color wheel. You know, those can kind of look good. Complementary are the ones on the opposite ends of the color wheel. And there's whole theories that go with this, and they just kind of keep experimenting. But because it's all generated by mathematics, there are certain things that you can do that just will work because it's mathematically compliant, you know. Ultimately, it comes down to like what you see with your eyes. So, all right, take a look at some of these tips now. It says, implementing a color scheme. It says, choose one color to be dominant. So I'll give you an example. If I was, you know, Coca-Cola, what's my dominant color? Yeah, not just red, Coca-Cola red. They have this very special color, right? If I was the Green Bay Packers, what's my color? Well, green and gold, right? So that's often thought of, but for Green Bay Packers, I do think green is the dominant color, and they have kind of like a foresty green. It's not really a true green. And then everything can kind of extend from there. If you're not sure what color to pick, you pick safe colors. So like a business website, they often go to blue because it's a safe color. It's comfortable to look at. It's also a good tip if you ever go for a job interview, wear the blue shirt. You know. It was really funny when we went on our Rockwell tour earlier this week. We showed up, you know, and half of the Rockwell people and most of the Gateway people were all wearing blue shirts, and one of our instructors like, well, I didn't get the blue shirt memo. And the reason we did that is because we know that's a complementary color for most outfits, and you walk in and it's just considered a powerful business color, just to give you an idea, right? It kind of has an implication. If I was, choosing pink, it might not be such a good business color. In fact, it might even offend people. But if I was like selling, I don't know, ballet shoes or something, pink might be the perfect color. So, these are things to consider. So where you use colors is important. So notice like what they're recommending here. Use neutrals such as white, off-white, gray, black, or brown as kind of safe colors to add a little bit of extra to your page. And I agree with this. Don't restrict yourself to the web-safe colors. I think any color is fair to use at this point. Right? Contrast is really important. If you're not sure if your website has enough contrast, there's actually these online tools you can go to where they can check your website for you and tell you if it's contrast compliant. I usually don't worry about that. Every once in a while when you guys are creating pages, and I think I maybe had a page or two with the HTML2 basics assignment where like people were putting like one color over another and it's kind of hard to see the difference. So for a good example would be like putting a blue link over a blue background. How are you going to see the link? You're not. Okay, so that's the kind of thing they're talking about here. If you are trying to pick color schemes, and we looked at a couple of these, my favorite out of all of these is the Adobe tool. And they call it something else now, but I think that link would still take you there. They call it Kuler, K-U-L-E-R. That's a great website. But honestly, I think all of these are pretty darn good. And what's really useful about this list of resources compared to just the color picker is that it shows you groupings of colors that work well together. And just as a really quick refresher, so if you just type K-U-L-E-R and do the search, it'll take you to the Adobe site, and once you see it on screen, you'll remember it. It was this tool, right? And then, like, you pick, like one basic color, right? You move it around, and then you can choose all the different types of color schemes, and then it gives you all the hex codes and all that stuff. And you can customize it and whatever. To me, that's the best of all of them, but I know some of it is just opinion, so be mindful of that. My opinion's not always the right one. All right, let's talk about target audiences now and how you use color depending on your audience. So notice here they're giving some examples. So the first one appeals to kids and preteens, right? Because it looks like a fun little game site online that you sit your 3-year-old down in front of to play video games all day so you don't have to babysit them, right? So you might have some real bright colors. Top right, it says appealing to everyone, beautiful graphics. Bottom one, dark text on top of a white background, appealing to older adults, also appealing to people that want to spend money, usually the same category. And then appealing to young adults, I always think of like gamers, for example, right? When are you guys playing games late at night, lights are low, right? Dark backgrounds are better with light text in those situations. Because then you bring up that Google screen and it's white and it like kills you because you're in the dark. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about, but you think about those things, like if I was designing like a fan page for like Star Wars, I'd go with a dark background. If I was building like an e-commerce site, I'm sorry, it's going to be white probably, or really, really light, depending on what I'm selling. So those are things you have to consider, folks. All right. What I'd like to do at this point, if you don't mind, let's take another short break, just to do a stand up and walk around, and then we'll come back and continue. All right, we're back from break, and we're just going to roll on here with Chapter 5. So they have some tips here for us on how to use graphics and multimedia on a website. And I know that I've talked to you a little bit in the last chapter about some good practices for graphics in particular. With a real big issue always being that you create graphics, or take photographs often with a phone, and you create these files that are huge, that are great for high resolution pictures, but really aren't great for websites because the large file sizes can basically slow down your site. So be really careful about especially graphic sizes. I had this example yesterday where we had this internal form that we have to fill out to complete some of our documents, and whoever put the form together thought it'd be really cool to put this graphic at the top. And you click the button, you're waiting for the thing to load, and 5 minutes later it finally loads, and I realize, oh my God, the graphic they put in here is humongous. No wonder it took so long to load. And this is on a high-speed network here at Gateway, whether they want to stay on your site or not.
How the web page is loading, how fast the web page loads.
No, I'm talking about how quickly they decide to leave your site. Usually it's less than 5 seconds. So they go to your site, take a glance, they're gone. It's like that. So most traffic on websites is like that. They think that this is where they're going, they end up there. And maybe it is something they want to see, but if they're frustrated and waiting for a page to load, they're gone. You don't want to lose your audience. So that's why it's really important, especially home pages, that they load really fast. It's not true for a lot of sites, though. Think about the sites you go to that maybe are a little slow. And I kind of have a policy, if I go to a site that's got so many ads and things going on and it takes forever to load, I'm like, never again. You know, it's a little extreme, but I certainly wouldn't give them any of my money, you know. Think of Google. It's up like that, right? That's what you want, folks. You want instantaneous. All right, they also talk about some of these other things. And I'm going to go to the bottom one because some of the other ones are covered later. But the multimedia. So what do we talk about? What's multimedia? We're thinking audio and video. I do go to some sites still. You know, every once in a while you land on a site and there's like music playing or something like that. Can I give you a really good example of it?
Look up Mark Pathrath. That's one of the sites that have music on.
Yeah, so sometimes we take the kids to the drive-in movie theater out past Waukesha. It's actually in Sullivan, I think. And watch what happens here. If it loads up. And I gotta make sure my volume is up. Oh, it's not doing it. You know, they have, you know what they have going on this site? And I should probably check my audio settings here. It should be. Yeah. They have the sound of crickets playing in the background. Yeah. And for whatever reason, maybe they have it turned off now or something because, you know, they're not showing any more movies. But you go to the site to see what movie's playing, and it's like crickets are playing in the background. I'm like, what a horrible choice. What other horrible choice do they have here?
The web browsers implemented standard that you can't have audio unless you want to
Yeah. Yeah,
Looks
that's
like Space Invaders.
yeah, it has flashing background. That's not really good either. But yeah, Joe's right. The general rule of thumb is you don't want to have audio that just plays when you get to a site. I feel the same way about video, but a lot of sites do that with ads because it's very obtrusive. So can you imagine like somebody's at work like doing something and they're like, okay, nobody's looking, I'm going to go in there, and then all of a sudden music's playing. It's like you're busted, right? Yeah, that's what happened to you earlier today. That's a really good example. So be really careful about how you put multimedia on a web page. I strongly suggest against any auto-playing audio or video. I would also be really cautious about how you put multimedia on a page because there's good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. And we'll talk about that when we get to the multimedia chapters. So, all right, so they have some general rules of thumb here, and I generally agree with most of these. Like, for example, with large graphics, so big photographs on a web page, try to keep them to under 60K. The one that I resized the other day, I think was like 80K. That's kind of okay. But as soon as it gets up to like 100, 200, 300, you will see it. I don't care how fast your connection is, you see it loading. Then if you have multiple images on a page, it's just really frustrating for the users, folks. So optimize your graphics. Always use the alt tag for HTML5, otherwise your stuff really won't validate well and it's considered poor practice. A lot of people do put in the alt tag and put in empty double quotes. That's considered for decorative images also, only, but I always recommend put something in there that describes it. Remember, if you have somebody that's hard of seeing or their images don't load because their connection's slow, at least tells them what they're supposed to be looking at. I also recommend that if you are going to set up navigation, try not to use images for navigation. And this is something we used to do in the past. We used to make graphics for buttons, for menus, and you know what? Now we're back to like just using text for it. And with all the CSS tricks that we have, you really kind of don't need to do that anymore, but I still see people trying to do that. Also, animation, only if it makes the page more effective. We saw a couple of really good examples of bad examples, which is the twinkling star background and then Ling's car. The whole site was like moving graphics. It really can disturb some people and turns a lot of people off. Okay, so another thing is they talk about what we call aliased and anti-aliased text. Now, generally speaking, when you put text on a page, the browser kind of adjusts it, okay? But if you ever create text into a graphic and then you make it bigger, you notice how like the bottom one gets really messed up? So they call that aliasing, because what happens is you draw the graphic, like the slant on the A, at a really small size, and really it's all little square pixels that form it. And then as you zoom in on it, you see the jagged edges. Anti-aliasing is the process of kind of filling in the jagged things when the text gets bigger. That's really only an issue if you're using graphics. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue for most people, right? Use only necessary images, I agree with that, so don't put just stuff on there just to put something on there. Reuse images wherever possible. What happens is, when you have an image that's on a website, so I'm just going to give you an example. When you log into your Gmail account, and your little Google logo comes up in the corner, or a Gateway logo comes up in the corner. The first time you hit that page, it loads up. You know what happens to it after that? It stores in your browser cache. So when I go to another page that has the same logo, it doesn't actually go to the internet to pull it down. It just pulls it up through your browser cache, makes the browsing faster. A lot of content like that, a lot of images that you see on web pages are stored on your machine. So sometimes when you guys are doing some work, and you know you changed the image on a page, and then you hit refresh and it's still the old image, hold down Control and press F5 to do what we call a hard reload, to actually clear the cache and then load the new image. Because what the browsers do is they use the strategy of using the old image to make your browsing faster so that it doesn't have to download. Kind of an interesting thing. All right. So they give a little example here of web page design load times. And I want you to notice, like, they have like really old, like in the old days of dial-up, if I had an image that was 1 megabyte in size, look how long I was waiting in seconds. I'd waiting almost 2 minutes for that image to load. Right. Now, you might say, all right, we don't operate at these speeds anymore. You know what, folks, that's wrong. When you drop down to 3G on your cell phone, or if you're even worse, you go out to the country and you're pulling old analog 1X signals, sometimes you drop down to these speed ranges, and it does take that long. So a 1 megabyte file, if it's taking 16 seconds to load, and then, oh my God, what if you have multiple 1 megabyte images on your site? You got a problem. So, you know, this is actually slow broadband, 1.5 megabits now. The typical starting speeds at home are usually around 100 megabits. Spectrum, I think, now is like 200 megabits. And that makes a big difference, but you also have to have a strong connection. You know, so either you're in with a wire or you have good Wi-Fi at home. You know, sometimes at our house, we have so much interference from neighboring Wi-Fi, because we live in a dense urban area, that can interfere with your speeds, because you're bouncing off of everybody else's signals too. So it can actually affect you. Efficient pages are really kind of the way to go. Let's talk about this. This is a really important topic, all the different browsers that are up there. And they have listed here, I'm going to call this an antiquated list, because Internet Explorer is still used, right? It still is loaded into Windows, although they hide it. So on Windows 10, you have to actually search for it to find it. And you know, usually when you launch it, I'm going to see if this is true, Microsoft might put up a thing, well, it's going to Google, but then Microsoft throws up a thing, says, hey, you should try Microsoft Edge instead. Really, you shouldn't be using Internet Explorer. There's a lot of security issues with it, folks. The environments in which you do find people still actively using it is because they've done specific application development for that environment. So I always think of like the Milwaukee Public Library for many years was stuck on Internet Explorer 6 because they paid somebody millions of dollars to write an application that only worked on that browser for whatever reason. And it took them a long time to switch away from it. But the big browsers these days in terms of popularity, certainly Google Chrome and Firefox are probably the two big ones. Let me see a show of hands. Who uses Chrome mostly? And I fall into that category. Who uses Firefox mostly?
It's a mix.
Yeah, I'm kind of a mix too, Cordy. Like when I'm at home and I do my personal surfing or Netflixing or whatever, if that's a word, I usually opt for Firefox, because Firefox, you know, I'm going to bring it up on the screen right now, has a lot of like really cool features built into it. So if you guys haven't used this browser in a while, I might have you consider going back to it, or at least checking it out. Because they have a bunch of tools in here, and I'm trying to remember how to trigger them. where they have all these content blocking tools, so it does like ad blocking, cookie blocking, just standard. Yeah, and Lakita just texted over a thing. She said it isn't as stressful on RAM as Chrome is. Chrome can be pretty inefficient in its RAM usage these days. Now, there's actually a reason for that, Lakita, and the reason for that is that Chrome is now used as an application delivery platform, and it used to be that all the tabs would run under one memory space, and now they've isolated it just like Microsoft did with Internet Explorer, so if one tab crashes, it doesn't bring down the whole browser. That's why it's a memory hog. But you know what? Most of us use it to do most of our work, so there's kind of a trade-off. There are some other browsers, though, that you guys should be aware of. And let me ask you this, Joe, you're on a Mac.
Yeah.
Do you use Safari mostly?
I love Safari for articles because it's like really beautiful, it's focused.
Yeah, it's a little bit more readable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you use an iOS device, right, if, Apple, iPad, iPhone, or a Macintosh computer, the primary browser on that platform is called Safari. Okay, so the one that Microsoft includes now in the modern versions of Windows is called Edge, and it looks like this. It's actually a pretty decent browser, but they've been having some issues with it, like a lot of people are not adopting it. So what they're going to do as a scheme, and I don't know if this update includes it, but in the near future, one of your updates is going to have it switch where it's still Microsoft Edge, but the code that runs it underneath is based on Google Chrome. How do you like that? Yeah. So what
They
that...
bought out Chrome pretty much.
No, they didn't buy out Chrome, but they're incorporating the Chrome code base because it's open source, and it's going to allow you to use all your Chrome plugins inside of Microsoft Edge, and they're hoping that it increases their market share a little bit. So that's a thing. But I do want to point out a couple of other browsers that maybe you haven't heard of that are actually kind of important. The first one I'm going to point out is one called Opera. Opera is a browser. I don't know if I have it installed on this system or not.
Is it available for Windows or? Is it
Yes, it is. It's available for all platforms, including mobile devices. And Opera is a really interesting browser because of this. They were one of the first ones that did a lot of the cutting edge development work. They've never had a big market share. I think it maybe maxes out at like 2 or 3% of market. But they're the ones that came up with tabs, the ability to view source, all sorts of like goofy little things like that. They were the first ones to develop it. And the people that use it love it to pieces. Can't ignore it. It's an important product. So as a web designer, here's a tip, folks. You should load as many browsers as you can on your operating system. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Internet Explorer, Safari. They used to have a Windows version, no more. But you should at least have those available. But,
Opera also, yeah, mobile browser, a lot of people in Africa use that because it consumes way less data.
yes, that is correct. The mobile browser version of Opera is amazing. That's actually one of my favorites for mobile. Here's another one that you may have heard of and may not have heard of. It's called Brave, and it's really kind of making a lot of inroads. And basically, Brave is another clone of Chrome, but it does some stuff that the other browsers don't. It's considered the safest privacy-based browser, so it automatically blocks ads and malicious content
But it's
by
sending
default.
across the pages to load, I'm guessing too, or no? That have you disable the ad?
So the question I was getting is, does it not allow you to go to certain pages that don't want you to disable ad blockers? Like there's some sites you go to, and you have to allow their content in to view their stuff. Now I kind of have a general rule of thumb myself. If I'm going to a site like that, and it's that kind of obtrusive, I really kind of don't want to go to that site. That's me. But sometimes they do have content that you just can't get anywhere else. Newspaper sites are most notorious for it. Why this is a really cool product is, okay, once you do load it up, and I do think I have this one loaded up on my OS here. Let me just double check. Oh, I guess I don't. What's kind of interesting about it, though, is that when you're using it, it will automatically block content, but they have this different scheme, right? Since they're blocking ads, you can actually opt in to view ads and earn cryptocurrency while doing it. Are you catching this? They're paying you to watch the ads. And then you can use the money or currency that you earn to support the people that create websites that have ad-free content.
So you don't get the currency, they give the charity.
No, that's not how it works, Cordy.
Okay. So
You earn cryptocurrency that you can only use to support people that have ad-free sites. So in other words, if you go to a site, and they don't have any ads, but they ask you to donate, you can donate with the cryptocurrency. So you're only supporting people that you want to support. That's kind of the thinking. The other thing that's really big in that browser, frankly, is this search engine that goes with it. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Everybody uses Google, but here's a search engine you might want to consider using. This is a search engine called DuckDuckGo.
all I've used
And this one, the thing with this is they do not track your searches. You don't have to sign in, and they don't cookie anything or store anything. So if you want to be a little bit more anonymous online, this is maybe an option that you might consider. But as web designers, it's really important for you guys to have accessible to you all the major browsers while you're designing pages. When you do basic pages, it doesn't matter so much. But when your designs get more complicated, you really need to check all the browsers to make sure that it looks the same, because sometimes it won't. All right, we'll talk more about that as we go, but I think that's pretty important to think about. The other thing is, we talked about this already, are various screen resolutions. So we are working with screens of different sizes, and you have to think about that when you're designing a web page. So like with the Mr. Robot page that we were working with, I eventually ended up narrowing up the content. And I still have that on screen somewhere, right? And the other thing I always have to worry about is what happens if I'm looking at it on a phone. Like if I keep going like this, will my site work? Well, you can see some of it's okay, but what happened to my logo? Well, that's no good, right? That really needs to be fixed. Because when I narrow my screen up like that, that's kind of what it's going to look like on a phone, folks. So that's something you really have to think about, especially given the fact that most web surfing is done on a phone. So that's a huge consideration. All right, we'll learn how to do that, so don't freak out. Like oh my God, my page isn't mobile compliant. Don't worry about it yet. Okay, I'll show you how to work around that. All right, very important considerations though. All right, so where do you put your navigation on a page? Yeah, the general rule of thumb these days is that you put it horizontally across the top. Why? Because that's where people expect to see it. And you know what? I think it makes the most sense. In the old days when we started designing web pages, the default spot for navigation was on the left. Like a side column on the left, kind of like where my slides are on the screen. You still see sites that use both. You'll see some sites that have actually multiple layers of top navigation and then some like sidebar navigation too. Depends on how complex the site is. But generally speaking, for whatever reason, people think they should look at the top for the menu. So you know what? Don't disappoint them. Put it there, right? So you want them to buy your stuff on your website? Put the menu where they can find it. Don't go hiding it. All right. They also have a couple of different things that they're talking about on this slide that I think are important as well. So take a look at, okay, navigation bars, we just talked about that, but there's this thing called breadcrumb navigation. Do you guys ever realize when you're in Blackboard and you look at the screens in Blackboard, whatever page I'm on, they have a breadcrumb trail. So notice I got home and then unit 5. So if I don't know where I am in the site, that helps me find my position. The Blackboard page is a perfect example of multiple layers of navigation in a lot of different ways, but they do have like a top thing that really has nothing related to the course you're in. The course navigation is on the left. And did you know that, I don't know if you guys can do this or not, I think you can. You can actually collapse the navigation down. Did you guys know that? Yeah, you can. Yeah, but you always have what they call a breadcrumb. So if I had like multiple layers, this is my top layer, and then this is a subfolder, and if I had another subfolder and another subfolder, I could access all of it through the breadcrumb. That's what they call it. So it's kind of like your way to find your way back to home. That's why they call it a breadcrumb. Yeah. Graphics for navigation, not a huge fan of that, especially these days, but some people do it. It's more appropriate for some sites than other. Some sites will have navigation that's relative to where you are on their site. So for example, if I go to Amazon.com, right, and then on their homepage, I'll get certain content. And then if I switch over to the Prime Video area to watch like movies or listen to music or something, the menus all change. You guys ever notice that? They have different layout, the sidebar menu goes away, you know. So some of it is relative to what you're doing on a site, and those are usually higher end sites. Some sites also have what they call a sitemap. I don't have a quick example off the top of my head, but some of them will provide a little link, usually at the bottom of their page somewhere. It says sitemap, that lists all the websites and all the pages on the site on one page, kind of like an index at the back of a book, where you can go there. You're not finding it on the site somehow, so you just go to the sitemap and you can find it. You can see their whole hierarchy and structure. Most sites now, good sites, will often offer search features. Now some of, that takes custom coding, so it's kind of advanced. Not something we're learning in this class, by the way. So you go to the site, they got a little search box. The Gateway site's a great example, right? If I go to Gateway and I want to figure out, let's say gtc.edu, and I want to figure out how to get Microsoft Office 365, I might come up here and type Office 365 like I've done before and then just search for it because I don't want to go hunting. And then it pulls up search results and hopefully I can find it. Okay? So people are kind of used to this now, right? And sometimes when people or websites don't have a search built in, what do? You go to Google and search the site, which you can do. So the author always pushes this thing, and I know when you guys are doing your homework that they suggest you do a skip to content hyperlink that you probably have read about if you're reading your chapters. And I have mixed feelings about this feature. It is considered an accessibility feature. So in other words, if the top of your page is loaded with like headers and search windows and navigation and multiple layers of navigation, and if you're bringing it up in a screen reader, you got to like kind of navigate, you got to like read through all that stuff before you get to the stuff. So one practice that designers do is they have a skip to content link way at the top that allows you to skip all the navigation and go right to whatever it is you're trying to get to. Designed for ADA compliance, folks. So the author pushes you a lot to add this in. I'm not a huge fan in general, but it depends on your audience once again. So keep those things in mind. So now we're getting to another thing that's going to be important for completing homework in this unit, and the concept of what we call a wireframe. So take a look at what a wireframe is image-wise. So it's not a web page, but it's a rough graphical representation of what a web page might look like in design mode. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you're thinking about the site you're going to build as a project in this class, is to come up with an image such as this. Okay, so how do you create wireframes? I'm going to tell you what. In my early days of doing design work, when I would do stuff, and I often worked with this third-party designer. You know how I would do it? Like this. I would just a whiteboard and a piece of paper. I'll go, well, we can put the navigation here. Let's have a footer at the bottom, and we'll do a thing here. It's like a pretty common layout. But when you do that, you can actually kind of narrow down what you're going to build, and then you kind of have a little bit of a roadmap or a target to reach a goal. And so when we leave this chapter, see, this chapter is mostly informational. That's why there's no homework attached to it. And we go into the next chapter, they start showing you how to do various typical layouts, like 3-column, 2-column, single page, that kind of thing, because those are all considerations. And what good designers do is they will start with a design first in the form of a wireframe, usually a rough representation, and then move to a more detailed design, and then transfer that design directly into HTML. I'm going to show you something I don't usually show a lot of my students. Hopefully I can find this stuff too, so there's that little caveat. But I've done a whole bunch of projects over the years, and I'm just trying to think here if I can find... Yeah. So like I was like navigating through my OneDrive, and I found some old projects that I was working on. All right, so I'll give you some examples. This is actually a student-built site. Okay, so these are, okay, that's not a good example. All right, and I'm not sure which one of these folders to even look in. So like a number of years ago, I did a restaurant website, so that one's empty. That's not one to look in. But I would work with this. Once again, this is not what I want to look at, so maybe this one. Okay, so here we go. So I'd work with this designer. He was a co-instructor that I had at the Art Institute up in Milwaukee when I was teaching there. And he would solicit clients, right? And then he wasn't a great coder. He could code, but he couldn't code that great. And so he'd hire me, and I'd do the coding and he'd do the design. So he would come up and he would like, for example, this is pretty old now. This is maybe, well, I don't know what the file dates are on this. It's older than the file date that's on there. It's probably like, maybe 2007 or something like that. And he solicited this company. This is a pizza place out in Elkhorn. I don't know if you guys ever get out that way. Called Sparino's, right? And they have a weird business. They have like a pub, a restaurant, and a catering business all in the same building. So like 3 different things. And what he did is he started first with a rough drawing like the one that we looked at. And then after the client kind of approved that in principle, he came up with the actual graphic. So he created this in Illustrator, right? That's a pretty nice looking design even though it's old, okay? And the thinking is this is the landing page, and then they have all these different, okay, so they have the banquet room, the catering, their restaurant, and their pub. And then each one of these would take you to a separate site. And he went through, folks, and he designed each section. So I'm just going to pull up a page here, for example. So this is the Pepperoni Pub, right? And this is what he designed as a graphic, right? And then, so the beauty is he gave me not only the graphic files, but he also gave me the Illustrator files, which include font sizes, colors, all the graphics as individual files. And then all I had to do was make a pixel-perfect copy of this in HTML form. And I don't know if I know the site now has changed, so if I go out to their website, 12, 15 years later, they've redesigned by now. And I'm assuming they still have a website in the business, right? So here's their current website, and I know it's not my design. Okay, so it's a different design now, right? But somewhere here, I'm hoping maybe I have some HTML mock-ups, and looking. Right? Okay, these are just images. Those are Illustrator files. So it just gives you an idea of like how projects like this are done. See, these are all Illustrator files. But here, I have an index page. Let me see what that does. Maybe that's got some of the CSS in it. Yeah. So this is my HTML representation of what he created, right? So I took all of his images and content, all the measurements, all the font sizes, all the exact color choices, and transferred it into HTML. I think it did all right, back then. But this is an example of one project. And often, when I would create these things, and I'm going to go to actually a personal site of mine, WMI. I'm going to show you another one that I did. All right, so this isn't a real website, but this is a project that we were soliciting a bid on, right? So he came up with this design, and then he gave it to me, and I turned it into a one-page HTML mock-up. So it's just the home page and the CSS, right? And this is also pretty old. It's a good 10 years plus. But I converted it into kind of proof of concept of what the site would look like in the browser. And the guy liked it, and I don't know what his deal was. He sells all these like political books, whatever, paycheck's a paycheck. And I don't know what his deal was. I think he like got sick and went into the hospital and then opted not to do any of this for whatever reason, probably couldn't afford it. We didn't work for free, you know. I would get paid pretty well to do these projects on a freelance basis. You know, typically $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 per project to build out the whole thing. And I know the designer guy was getting a good chunk of change too. But it does make a difference when you have a professional looking website that's got good appeal, easy to navigate, the graphics are good, the colors are good. But see, I did have an artist designing it. But you see some of the techniques that are being used, you know, just very simple little layout things and organization. All right, so that's just some examples of going from a wireframe to an actual design. Wireframes are important because if you're going to build a website, do you want to like spend all this time like creating a bunch of code and then have somebody walk up to you and go, I don't like that? No. You're going to do it in a format where you can change it easily. So what kind of tools can you use to do a wireframe? Well, it depends. Let's take a look at some layouts. So look at a real basic one. And this is kind of the approach that we've been using so far, where we have a header, top level menu, some content, and a footer. No side columns, no internal content columns, right? Then you might switch to maybe a 3-column approach if you have a lot of content in the middle. Maybe have some spots for graphics, some spots for text. Then you might consider some alternate approaches. Take a look at left side navigation. I think that can be very useful, actually. Look at Blackboard, right? Then you have this one that's got a little more graphics and the sidebars become a little less important. Those are nice techniques. And then you see some of these switched into actual graphic view. So for example, the top one talks about how that design, even though it smartly doesn't go all the way across the screen, is off to one side. That doesn't look so good, does it? That's kind of an old-fashioned approach. You notice that the Apple website was like that? The more modern approach is more appealing, is that you narrow it up and center it on the page. Also works much better on phones that way. So I think that's an important consideration. Take a look at some of these others, right? Different approaches. Sometimes you can take that header and make that go all the way across, but keep your content narrow. That's the bottom image. Or, hey, you got a whole screen, why not use it? But when you have that kind of a layout, you got to be really careful when it starts to scale down. What happens to your content when you squeeze it down? Sometimes you have to write what we call media queries, or design your page with one of the frameworks like Bootstrap or CSS Grid that will automatically kind of move stuff around for you. And this can be a little bit of a perplexing issue when you start to code it out, especially when you've never done it before, because it's a really important issue. If you get lost, you know, doing a layout, especially getting it to respond to different form factors, what I always recommend is go back to simple things, because simple things always work well. It's kind of a crazy thing, but sometimes you work with CSS and you add one pixel somewhere and it breaks the whole thing. And it'll be frustrating. But there are techniques for working with it, and I will teach you the techniques in a methodical kind of way. All right, so you can see the slides kind of did. Predicted by 2015, more users will access websites using mobile devices. Yeah, you know what? We're way past that point. It's like 80–90% now. It's crazy. I think I went to a conference in 2014, and in 2014, one of the Google people said that in 2014 that 70% of the web surfing at home was on a mobile phone at that time. So you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you're probably not pulling out your laptop, you're probably on your phone. And then I look at like my wife, she does almost all her surfing on the phone. I'm like, why don't you use the screen while you're hurting your eyes? And she's like, oh, I like it, and my phone's better. It's like, okay, whatever, you do what you want. I still like big screens myself. Yeah, so the other thing that happened, and this was about 4 years ago, Google made a declaration. They said this: sites that are not mobile compliant get deprioritized in search listings. So if you have a website that does, like my Mr. Robot logo didn't work, you know, sorry, you're at the bottom of the list. End of the line, right? But if you're mobile compliant, we're putting you up at the top because they also realize the data. Most people surf on mobile devices. So, mobile first. All right, so since we designed for mobile almost as a primary platform, you guys will always or often be doing this. You should be, you know, full screen sizing your browser and then switching to like really narrow views. Take it as narrow as it goes. Does it look okay? Sure. Obviously Google's thinking about it, right? Are there examples of sites? I'm going to give you a couple examples of sites. So here, I'm going to take you to some stuff I go to often. Like I always go to this website to read the news almost on a daily basis. I like having a non-American perspective on the news personally because it gives you a little bit of clarity. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but notice, you know, full screen. Take a look at how the content is laid out. I want to make sure I'm also at 100% zoom, which I am, okay? But then notice as I come out of full screen and start changing, what happens to the site? Yeah, it's adapting. In fact, they have, every time it switches modes, I'm hitting what they call a media query. It's detecting the screen width and changing the CSS, right? And I can keep going and watch what happens. It switches, it keeps switching. The menus disappear, the content narrows up, but they're ready for whatever device comes to that page. And that's really important, folks, really, really important. And that's considered the ideal way to do it. In the past, when mobile was new, sometimes we would run a media query to check the screen size of the device visiting the page, and then give it a different web page. And that approach is considered antiquated now. Some people still do it. They just have mobile-only sites. And some people, like you'll go to some websites, for example, and say, load the desktop version of the site. Right? You see that? Right. Because sometimes you don't see all the content on the mobile version. That's the other thing. Because you don't have the screen space for it. But things to consider as you're designing. These are important things to consider. All right, this whole thing of like being able to adjust your screen, it's called responsive web design. When Jason was here last week, you guys heard him talk about that. Responsive is where it's at. There are some articles that you can read here, and they also have examples at that site. I'm not going to mess with them too much because I think I already kind of did that. They also have kind of some best practices, and this link here is provided by the author. But they have a checklist for like things you should check. So if you wanted to go to that website, you know, feel free. But they talk about these basic issues. So when you design your site, are you thinking about what layout you're using? Does it work with all the browsers? Is your navigation? Are your colors and graphics good? Is your multimedia not obnoxious? Are people getting the content they're actually looking for without having to like look forever to find it? Does it actually work? Does everything work on the site? And are you thinking about the people that are in the special needs categories? Blind, deaf, hard of hearing, old, you know, young, slow. You know, that happens too.
What about disability?
You're right. It's an advantage, right? Yeah. Sometimes I think, you know, I see some web pages where people think that they're more clever than their users, and it's almost like trying to solve like a puzzle to try to get to the content you want, and I hate that. It should be obvious. I mean, when I was doing that fave icon thing, I thought there were some usability issues there because it wasn't clear to me what to click on. And I don't consider myself dumb. You know what? When you go to, I'll use this as an example. If you go to Facebook and you bring up a page, right? If you're going to Facebook, if you're not already logged in, right? What are they giving you as an option here? Well, you're either going to log in, or if you have multiple accounts connected, you know, like on my home machine, you'll have my wife's account, my account up there. So you're either logging in or you're signing up. I'll tell you what, I'm not missing that sign up button. That's pretty big and green and pretty damn obvious. And notice that, you know, if you're not on board already, you go to their homepage, what are they trying to get you to do? Create a new account. There's no guess as to what's going on here. That button is called a call to action, by the way. It's a real common application term. I mean, how many users do you think they'll get if that was a hard-to-find button? Yeah, you know, they probably still get a whole bunch, but you know, just think about it. All right. Almost to the end here, folks. All right. We have a checklist here, and I'm going to just tell you that if you want to read through this, I think this is a pretty useful list. So if you design a website, I would recommend that maybe you come in here and you start looking at what it says here and see if you can cross everything off the list. I will, when I assign you projects, you know, especially the final project, I will have certain parameters. They won't be as stringent as this. But professional developers think about all of the things on this list pretty extensively too. So page layout, does it work with all the browsers? Is the navigation clear? The color and the graphics good? Is the multimedia not obnoxious? You guys notice here they're talking about Flash, and I know all of you probably use Chrome and you get those notifications now. It's like Flash is like, you know, being turned off at the end of the year, so you want to get rid of it now? And I say, hell no, I still like Flash because you know, I'm kind of used to it. But there's a lot of websites that are going to have problems because they use Flash content. And it's unfortunate. It's a technology that's kind of going away. And then think about how your content is presented. Do you have, you know, good fonts? Is your writing clear? You know, think about this. When you guys are putting out text content on a website, you better like proofread that stuff, right? You know, there's people that have a job that their only job is to check the content on a website. There's people whose job it is only to create wireframes. Google's got a whole team of people, you know, and I saw this in a video once, that walk around with these like little mini whiteboards, and they try to do proof of concept of design, so they like do a layout with like a marker, and they walk up to people at Google and go, hey, do you like the button here, or do you want me to put the button over here? You like green better, or should I go blue? You know what kind of money these people make? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're called user interface designers or UX designers. It's a whole field of study. They don't even code. All they do is come up with the layouts. Create wireframes and mock-ups, they call them. Okay. Other stuff to think about. Does the site actually work? Like, do you click on a link? Does the link work? Sounds pretty stupid, but you guys will discover as you're coding that, like, especially you got multiple pages, maybe you updated the menu on this page, but you forgot to do it on that page, that kind of thing. So does everything work? And you know what? When I grade your stuff, I start checking that stuff, just so you know. So you should check all your links, make sure everything works the way it's intended. And then also you have that accessibility thing that we've been talking about. All right, and I think that covers it. So those are best practices. I really like that list at the end of the PowerPoint. So when you guys maybe move into more advanced levels of study and you're building websites or you start freelancing and stuff, it's not bad to have a checklist like this around that you look at and you go, did I think about this? Did I think about this? Did I think about this? Because it's easy to forget, frankly. You get so lost in what you're doing that you stop thinking about what you're actually creating. All right, folks, that covers Chapter 5. That will help you complete one of the assignments in Unit 5. And the one that I'm thinking about here is the site design. So I want to talk about that really quick before you go. I know time's up. If you have to go, just go. But the site design assignment is kind of a three-phase thing. So the first part of it is, you maybe have been thinking about it already, and I did a document, I had you do a document earlier in the semester about possible websites. Remember that? Please nod and smile. Great. So now you're going to have to actually pick one to go with. And then what I want you to do is type up a paragraph or two about what site you're creating. Like, I'm going to create a website for, you know, my veterinary business or my tree trimming service or whatever, and describe it to me so I know what exactly you're doing. I want more than a sentence though. I don't want like, I'm going to build a Star Wars fan page. No. I want details. I'm going to put this on it, and we're going to create that. My target audience is this, you know, and you should, you know, The website name, your target audience, the site will do, what type of information will provide, the content that might be included, etc. You're going to type that up as a Word document. The second part of it is to create a sitemap. You guys remember when we saw the hierarchies of the websites? Most of yours are going to fit into the basic ones that we looked at. In fact, I'm going to have a requirement, and I think the requirement is a total of 6 pages, 6 unique pages for a website. So for most of you, the sitemap is going to look like home at the top and then a few subpages. That's mostly what we should be seeing. Next, I want you to start to create a rough wireframe. Now you can do this a number of different ways. In the most primitive, you could draw it by hand and snap a picture of it. That would be one way to do it. What you might want to consider doing, though, is maybe taking a tool like PowerPoint even, and this seems like it'd be kind of a silly thing to do, but create a new slide. You can get rid of like the boxes that are here. And, you know, it's got drawing tools built into it. Did you guys know that? Kind of like we were doing the flowcharts and stuff, remember? So you can come in here, and I could make like, you know, a header, and put in a font, and drop in like a picture, and put in some text. You guys kind of getting the idea? So if you want to do it with a graphical tool, PowerPoint's not a bad one to do it with for a couple of reasons. The page layout is kind of like a screen layout. The graphical tools are really easy to use and to type into. But if you want, I'm going to give you this as an option too. There are wireframing tools out on the internet that work in the browser or that you can download and try that you can play with as well. But any sort of tool that you can create graphics in will work. Real popular ones with students to do this kind of stuff is some people just use Word. Some people use like Paint or Photoshop, Google Draw, PowerPoint, because they're fairly easy to use. And you know, when I create a box like this, you know, I can also type into it without much effort. You see, I didn't even like have to click in it; it just automatically does it. So a rough representation of what you're going to create. So like where your navigation is, your header, your content, whatever. So that's a 3-phase assignment. So the first part of what you're going to do in this unit is that. There is also the case study that goes with Chapter 6. We're going to talk about Chapter 6 next week, but I'm going to warn you guys, Chapter 6 is included on the midterm, so you want to read ahead. The midterm, I think, becomes available at 3 o'clock today and is active until noon of next week, Friday. Yeah. In fact, actually, I think it expires at midnight the day before class, because I have to post grades on Friday next week. So you guys have a week to do the midterm. You guys catching that? Then you have one additional assignment.
Friday, you said?
All right. You'll have one additional assignment in this unit, and that is a site building assignment. And this, if you look at the due date for this actually falls after midterm. So please check those due dates. All right. Chapter 6 content's included on the midterm. Some of these assignments are not. So this, I think you actually have about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks to do this one. This is where you do kind of like your preliminary build of the website that you will be creating in rough form. And you know, like we did the HTML basics assignment where I had a bullet list of all the stuff you need to do. You notice the bullet list here? That means you have to go through here and make sure you're doing all of this stuff. And that's what I'm grading you on, is what you hit all those bullets, you're good. Okay? So please read those really carefully. Next week we'll talk about it some more. Remember, midterm is online, your own time. I'm not sure what else to add. Good luck. It's not that hard, so don't freak out. Just make sure you have a good internet connection before you begin, and don't let your browser time out. So don't let your browser sit idle for 5 minutes, because you will time out of the exam. And don't wait till next Thursday night at 11 p.m. to take it. Just a fair, I mean, you could, but just a fair word of warning, don't. Right? Just find a quiet time when you have a good internet connection. What I would actually recommend is make sure you read chapters 4, 5, and 6. There's a lot of stuff in those chapters in there. And once you've done that, have your book at your side, you know, Google next to you, and take the exam. All right? Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.